So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Moving Beyond Cancer to Wellness. I'm Dr. Scott Baker, and I'm the director of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center Survivorship Program, and I'm very pleased to open our actual 13th annual educational event for cancer survivors. Also of note, I think this is the first of 13 years where the city of Seattle didn't close I-5 going one direction or the other, or one of the bridges, so I'm thankful for that. Just a few housekeeping items. The restrooms you probably found, but they're located behind the registration desk down the hallway there, and then some of the breakout sessions are in the Arnold building, which is just across the parking lot, and there's restrooms over there as well. And so you can find those. Just of note, the speaker presentations, their slides will actually be available on the event website within 2 weeks following the event. The website information is on the back of the program, and so you can check there for those postings and be able to see all the slides from the presentations. And we really would appreciate it if everybody could complete the evaluation form, which was located in the bag that you received when you checked in. That feedback we actually take very seriously, and it really helps us to plan next year's events, including topics, what people liked, what they didn't like. So we really appreciate your effort to fill out that and turn it in. So I'd also like to take a minute to thank the supporters of the event today, including the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, Team Survivor Northwest, Cancer Lifeline, Cancer Pathways, Genentech, and Bristol Myers Squibb, who provided the fun photo booth. Immediately following the keynote speaker today, the breakout sessions will start. And each of you have selected 3 breakout sessions to attend, and these can be found in your program. So currently you're in the Thomas building, and so there's breakout sessions here. And then, as I mentioned, just across the parking lot is the Arnold building, and there are some breakout sessions held over there. There's signs around to help you find your directions, and then all of our volunteers and staff in the blue t-shirts who can help you find specific rooms and things also. And unfortunately, just to point out in your program in breakout session number 1, we've had a late cancellation this morning due to a medical emergency. And so the speaker for the mind-body medicine, writing as self-therapy, is actually not going to be able to be here this morning. Unfortunately, there's a fair number of you that are signed up for that. You can just attend any of the other 10 o'clock breakout sessions that you want. So just take a minute to check those other ones out, and feel free to attend one of those. So we apologize for that. And then lunch is at 12:45, importantly, and back in the cafeteria where breakfast was. And we ask that you just please take 1 box lunch per person, so we have enough for everybody attending, as well as our volunteers and vendors and everybody. So, and then after lunch at 1:45, Dr. Karen Seralia, who's the co-director of the survivorship program, will give a brief presentation about using a survivorship care plan to promote health. And then immediately following her presentation will be our much anticipated survivor panel discussion, which is always a highlight of the event, and that will be the concluding component of the program today. Actually, the concluding component will be the 3 p.m. prize raffle drawing, and you have to be present to win. So please stay for that. So now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Terri Tate. Terri's a psychiatric nurse specialist and an inspirational humorist. She was first diagnosed with oral cancer in 1991 and is now a nationally recognized speaker and storyteller who uses lessons from her own struggle to help support others. She recently has published a book, her memoir, entitled A Crooked Smile, which she will have available for sale in the table just outside of the auditorium. So we're delighted to have Terri here this morning, so please join me in giving her a warm welcome.
No, I just have to.
All right.
Okay, am I on? Yeah. All right. Am I too loud? Am I going to blow you out of the wire here? Okay. Welcome. What a wonderful crowd. This is fabulous. And how do I look? Yeah. You know, we're on TV. We're being streamed on Facebook, whatever the hell that means. And I've always wanted my own TV show, so I think this could be my big break. So I may have gone a little heavy on the eye makeup, but you understand it's for the camera. But that's actually not why I'm here. The reason that I'm here is to celebrate all of you. Whether you are newly diagnosed or the veteran of the ravages of cancer like myself, or a caregiver or supporter, you are special, and your story matters, and it's worth celebrating. So I'm going to tell you my story, but this is really about you. And remember that the quality and importance of our life stories is not based on duration. It's based on how well lived that life is. And I'm hoping that you'll really take this opportunity to take in how unique and important you are and to feel really good about the life story that you're writing. So who am I and what am I doing here? Why am I qualified to be here? I am, as Dr. Baker mentioned, a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in 1991 with cancer of the tongue, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. I had a 2% chance of survival, and I celebrated 26 years since the end of treatment. Last March 11th, but who's counting? So I figure I don't really have to do much. I know that when I had cancer, if I had seen somebody who was not supposed to make it, who did, that was good enough for me. So I'm sort of a visual aid, and I figure everything else is gravy. I'm also a nurse. I've been a nurse for 51 years, and I know, isn't that amazing? Can you believe how old I am? Dear God. But given that there was a really good chance that I wasn't going to get to be this old, I'm not complaining. So I'm a very happy 73. So I've been a nurse for a long time. Now, for those of you who are medical people, I need to qualify that and say that I'm a psychiatric nurse, which to some people doesn't really count. But I happen to prefer patients who keep their secretions to themselves. So I went immediately into psychiatric nursing and have been very happy there. I'm also recently a supporter. My best friend back in Michigan, who was there for me in more ways than I can possibly tell you, it was just diagnosed with breast cancer. So next week, I'm going to go back and be with her while she has radiation. So the other reason that I'm here is to give a big thank you to the caregivers and providers and loved ones. It's sort of ironic. I spent a lot of my career going around the country talking to nurses and doctors and other healthcare providers about caring for themselves. My theme was, you can't take any better care of your patients than you do of yourselves and each other. And so I would preach self-care to caregivers. Funny though, when I had cancer, I was not that empathetic with my caregivers. Cancer, in my experience, tends to create a little self-absorption. And I was, I didn't think anybody needed a break. I thought, this is all about me. So on behalf of all the patients here who are not able to adequately thank the people caring for them, I say a huge thank you. And I take drinks of water because radiation zapped my salivary glands. And I have weirdness swallowing. So sometimes even water is a little bit weird. But my mouth gets stuck together if I don't do it. So back in December of 1991, I was brushing my teeth one night when I noticed a little sore about 2/3 of the way back on the left side of my tongue. And I thought that, and I showed that to my then fiance. And I was about to get married. I have a little marriage repetition issue. So I won't tell you which number husband this was. But anyway, I was focused on the wedding, and then my son got in some trouble, so I was focused on that. Thankfully, he hasn't gotten in much trouble since, so that was good. But I sort of, my fiance said, I get those all the time. It'll go away. Well, it didn't go away. And I went to an ENT doctor who said, you're too young to have the risk factors for cancer. Most oral cancer patients are 65-year-old, chain-smoking, hard-drinking men. And the dentist said, I think a tooth is rubbing on that spot. And I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the time, and I'm a mental health type. And my fiance is a rolfer, or was a rolfer, if you know what that is. So, I was open to all manner of weirdness. And now I live in California, so I rest my case. So we tried everything. I went to every kind of healer and, who came up with all kinds of wild theories. The sore didn't get better. And it got bigger and more sore, and there were fewer and fewer things that I could eat every day. And finally, I went to one of the sort of far out doctors who said, I don't know what that is, Terri, but if I were you, I'd get it biopsied. And spoiler alert, it was cancer. And so they did the first surgery, which took out part of my tongue and the margins and some lymph nodes. And everything came back fine. And I had promised God before the surgery that if the cancer was gone, I would take care of myself, that I would really start treating myself better. And because that speech that I was giving all around the country about self-care was actually intended for me, of course, because I firmly believe that I was codependent in utero. I really think that as a little fetus, I was like, Mom, am I pressing on your bladder? I'm sorry. Oh, no, now I'm obstructing your breathing. Oh, I'm really sorry. And from the moment I came out, I was worried about everybody else. And I was worried that my mom wasn't happy. And then when they started having more kids, I had huge responsibilities. I was 4 when the next brother was born, and then another one at 6. By the time I was 7, if my parents said, we're going out to dinner, I said, are we taking the kids? So I had, and then I started getting married, and then the codependency really kicked in, and then I had kids of my own, and so, I was always last on the list. So after that surgery, and everything was fine, and you really couldn't tell. I looked the same, I taught the same. People who didn't know I'd had cancer didn't know, that anything had changed. So I took a couple walks. I ate some broccoli. I did a few meditations and visualizations. And then before you know it, I was right back where I'd been before, worrying about everybody else, working too hard, and back in the old patterns. So, but at that point, I was done with cancer. I wasn't going to support groups. I wasn't a cancer patient. I'd had cancer. They took it out, done. And so I was going to go on and live my life. Well, about a year and a half later, I started getting a burning feeling in my mouth. And again, things were difficult to eat. And this time there wasn't a sore, so there was nothing that they could point to or biopsy, but it just didn't feel right. So the doctor and I had gotten to be sort of friendly by this time, and he was an ear, nose, throat guy who mostly put tubes in kids' ears. So I think that we always had a nice conversation when I went for checkups, because I think he was so happy to see somebody over 7. But so I think that by the time this happened, he didn't really want me to have cancer again much more than I did. And so he tried everything. Well, I think it's an infection. Take these antibiotics. Well, I think maybe it's a side effect of the antibiotics. So let's wait a little while. Well, maybe it's thrush. Let's test you for thrush. Well, no, it's not thrush. Let's try lichen planus. Maybe that's what it is, whatever the hell that is. And on it went, so that by the time I got the biopsy 3 months later, I had a tumor the size of a golf ball where my tongue had been. Now, how he couldn't see that is anybody's guess, but at any rate, but at that point, and that was, the prediction about the 2% had been if it recurred, the odds would be about 2%, and it was recurring with a vengeance. So they did surgery. I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan, the home of the University of Michigan, and ironically ended up at Ohio State University for my surgery. Now, my father was an alum of Ohio State, and I said I thought it was a vicious plot. I said, you will stop at nothing to get me to go to Columbus, won't you? So we put a little blue and gold Christmas tree in my room, and to show our true colors. And so I was in the hospital for 16 days over Christmas, and my entire family and support group migrated to Columbus and to be with me, which was just, amazing support that I had. And so they were going to remove the cancer and possibly remove my jaw. And it turned out that they did need to do that. And they took my left hip bone, my iliac crest, in order to fashion a new jaw. And then they took the muscles and the vessels and everything, and they crafted. And that was why I went to Ohio State, because there was a doctor there who had been trained at Michigan, who was the only one in the country who did this procedure at that time. So that procedure failed 6 times. On the 7th try, they got it. and took me to that surgery lasted 20 hours. And then they took me to the ICU. And I didn't think I'd remember what it was like in the ICU, but I do. And I remember that I couldn't breathe because I felt like I couldn't breathe because I was on a ventilator. And nobody had mentioned that it feels like you can't breathe. I guess they assumed the nurse would know that, but not a sight nurse. And I have vague memories. I remember my parents going by like they were on a conveyor belt. And I thought, oh, they weren't supposed to be here yet. And I didn't know if I was like in the afterlife, what was going on. I remember a chaplain who came in who I swear looked exactly like Ichabod Crane. That's never been validated, by the way. But my other memories have been. And then I remember Dr. Sullivan coming in and saying, Terri, the flap has collapsed again. We have to go back to the OR. So we went back to the OR for another 4 hours in which they installed a titanium bar in my, where my jaw had been, and took tissue from my chest and neck and built a free flap around the bar. So I'd like to say that part of my left breast is on permanent loan to my mouth. Not that I had a great deal to spare, mind you. But so they built the flap, and so my jaw ends here. So I have 5 remaining lower teeth. And they're still hanging in there 26 years later, which is a miracle. I know they have issues, my teeth, but they're still there. All right. So then I had 7 weeks of radiation, during which the bar came loose, and it had to be removed. And so at that point, the doctors said that I was going to have to do more surgery. The guy that had done the hip wanted to use my other hip bone and try that again. And I was like, oh, because it worked so well the first time. What a wonderful idea. Let's do that. And then I heard about somebody in Florida who had a new system of implanting cadaver jaws. So we went to see him, and the very fact that I would consider a cadaver jaw, at that point, I was just in such a space. You sort of lose touch with reality in a way when you're in the midst of it. At least I did. And it's a whole different world, I think. I don't know if you found that, but there were times when I couldn't believe that life was still going on. Have you had that experience? I would turn on the TV and it's like, David Letterman is still doing his show. How can that be? Doesn't he know that the world is upside down? It's a very interesting kind of phenomenon. So the cadaver jaw guy said, he was telling me how much better his procedure was than the free flap, and in fact, in front of a whole room of male residents, showed how the guy had done the free flap and said, oh, you never do it in the front on a woman. Look what it's done to her breast. You always take it from the So he wanted to put the cadaver jaw. The other guy wanted to use this hip. And then I went to my doctor at Michigan, who said, well, here are some other options. And it was like, no more options. Because I don't know about you, but for me, one of the most challenging parts of this whole experience was figuring out which treatments to do. I remember distinctly that I was afraid of dying, but second to dying, and a very close second, I might add, was being on my deathbed and having the voice in my head that I refer to as the vile bitch upstairs, saying, I told you you should have gone on that macrobiotic diet. You know, if you would have done those vitamins, and what about that kind of massage I told you about? And if you'd done more coffee enemas, we did actually do that. We did everything. This was in the early 90s. So even though it was Ann Arbor, where, you know, which is like California in Michigan, and, you know, weirdness prevailed, there were a lot of alternatives available, but nothing like what you have to deal with today. I mean, today the options are so overwhelming. Today the options for everything are so overwhelming. Have you ever tried to pick out yogurt? I mean, the next time you're in the grocery store, go to the yogurt section. And, you know, do you want high fat or low fat? Do you want Greek or regular or Icelandic? Do you want dairy or not? And it continues to grow. You know, I mean, very soon they'll be making yogurt out of God knows what. But it's overwhelming. And you're in the middle of it, and everybody with really good intentions tells you that you have to do this, and you have to do that. And so now I was making this decision about this surgery, and my desire had always been to make people happy. But having just the one mouth, I wasn't going to be able to make everybody happy. And I wanted to please my doctor. I loved the doctor who did this surgery. He was just a wonderful man. And even though it didn't work, I was never mad at him because I knew how hard he had worked. And I didn't want to disappoint him. You know, I wanted to do what he wanted me to. But I wasn't really that eager to give up my other hip and, you know, sacrifice even more of my waistline, which was one of my better features. So the doctors had their opinions, and, you know, I have a tendency to ask everybody else's opinion, and so everybody else had a different opinion. And I had surgery scheduled in Columbus, Ohio, Miami, Florida. The dates were approaching, and I was going a little crazy because I didn't know what to do. So one night I went out on her deck and I said, please, God, tell me what to do. And I was hoping that there would be like a booming voice from the clouds, you know, like the blue light special at Kmart that said, you know, have the surgery in Ohio. But nothing happened. And so I went to bed sort of disappointed. But the next morning, I woke up with this knowing that if I got back into another patient gown, I was never getting out again. And it took a little while, but it was a clear voice. And I had never really heard anything inside except the bitch. She was a constant presence. When I first named her, some sort of new agey friends of mine said, "Oh, vile, the vile bitch upstairs? That's way too strong a word." I said, "You don't know her." If anything, that's an understatement. So that, I thought she was me, because that was all I'd ever heard. But oral cancer shut me up and slowed me down long enough that I had to listen to other voices. I had to spend time alone. And I had always hated being alone. That's why I kept getting married. But I was forced into it. And, you know, I mean, I haven't been in California long enough that I buy the cancer as a gift story. If it's a gift, somebody is a really bad shopper. That's all I got to say. And next year, just skip my birthday. But there are opportunities in it. And so I spent time alone, and not by choice, but, you know, eventually other people got back to their lives. I was a little annoyed at that, but I got a little stronger, and people were back living, and I was left on my own. But the upside of that was that I got to know myself in a way that I would not have if I had been allowed to just run wild all the time. So I heard this voice, but I didn't know if I could trust it. And I started writing in a journal and writing questions and getting answers. Now, I know that does sound like I'm from California, but you might want to try it. It's not bad, because you know what's right for you. You know yourself and your body better than anybody. And I ultimately got clear that I couldn't have that surgery, that I'd been a patient for a year and I just couldn't do it. And they all said that if you don't do the surgery, your jaw will gravitate over to the left, and you won't be able to talk even as well as you do, or eat even as well as you do. And it was like, well, you know, maybe that's so, but the truth is I can't go through another operation. So they left it, and 26 years later, my jaw is pretty much in the same place, and, you know, my articulation is not good enough that they don't always write sherry on my cup at Starbucks, but I manage. And, you know, eating is still a challenge, but I manage to do it. And what I've learned over this time is that inner voice knows better for me than anybody. Now, I'm not saying don't follow medical advice. That's not what I'm saying. But in this instance, this was optional. This was not treatment. This was, you know, did they go this extra step? And I knew for me that it wasn't. And so I, since then, have come to be nicer to myself. I hear voices other than the vile bitch upstairs. And I hear this guidance. I discovered a part of me that hadn't really grown up yet. And I think we all have little kids inside, again, at the risk of sounding very Californian. But be really gentle with yourself in this process. Whether you're the patient or the loved one. This is rough. This is hard stuff. I mean, my marriage didn't make it. My husband said throughout all the disfigurement, he said, when I would say, oh, I look horrible, what do you think? Although, to tell the truth, I never really got how I looked. I think I'm still sort of in denial about that. Every once in a while, I'll catch my reflection in a window or see a photograph that is an angle that I haven't seen before, and I'm sort of horrified. And now, of course, age is competing with cancer for robbing me of my former splendor, which, by the way, I didn't appreciate at all. As Joni Mitchell says, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. I never thought of myself as attractive. Now, looking at pre-cancer photos, I see that I was. But at the time, my thighs were too big, my boobs were too small, I was too tall. All that stuff we do to ourselves. Don't do it. It doesn't matter. You are perfect just the way you are. And ironically, I like myself better and feel more attractive some days than I did back when I was really beautiful. And so it really is about how you treat yourself. And being forced to be alone allowed me to really focus on myself, something that I had never done before. I was codependent in utero. I became a nurse, so I was licensed by the state of Michigan to be a codependent, and it was always out there. I had to be with myself and learn slowly to accept myself the way I am. And if there's one thread that you can write into your story, to do as much of that as you can. We are all so hard on ourselves. Of all the things that I've talked to people about, the thing that people remember the longest and talk to me about the most is the vile bitch upstairs. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, everybody has them. I thought it was only me, of course, but in fact, everybody has one. So if in this process you can be a little kinder to yourself, accepting things as they are, forgiving has been really important to me. A kind of, forgiving myself for things I didn't do. That was what I worried about when I didn't get the surgery, was that if it turned out all these horrible things did happen, I would make life really miserable for myself. But be gentle. The truth is, nobody knows. They know more and more every day about what is going to help, what is going to cure, those things. And you are in a place, you're very fortunate to be in one of the best places in the world to get the latest in cancer treatment. But nobody knows for sure. If there were one sure way of treating cancer, we'd all be doing it. So even though, the people with the shark cartilage told me for sure that was going to do it, and the man who built the rice generator, which my husband built for me, by the way, which might have been a bad sign, I had to put my feet in water and then do these electrode things, so they were sort of zapped. In retrospect, that might not have been such a good idea, but anyway, he was very sweet, and he was, he did all kinds of things and was really there for me. And then after the disfiguring surgery, he said that he could see through that and saw my inner beauty. And then a few years later, he opted for the outer beauty of a younger, blonder, more symmetrical woman. So I have been on my own now for quite a while. And I'm still working on forgiving and accepting myself. One of the best ways that I've found to do that is to shift my focus onto what I'm grateful for. And I write a gratitude list of 7 things I'm grateful for just about every day. And there's been studies that indicate that gratuitous gratitude, just telling somebody something that you appreciate about them, actually makes you happier. So as your story unfolds, if you can find things in even the crappy days that you're grateful for, and write those down, it will shift things a little bit. How are we doing on time?
Still have about 8 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Does anybody have questions for me? Yes?
What would you do now as far as treatments go with the conventional or integrative?
Did you hear the question? What would I do now in terms of the conventional integrative? Well, I know that the treatment for oral cancer has changed a great deal. And so I would do what the doctor said. It was real clear to me back then that I was going to find out about macrobiotic diets, and I would do, I went to a Czechoslovakian sea captain that my husband found who read energy. Very weird. We did coffee enemas, which gave new meaning to having coffee together. But I knew that this thing was growing in my mouth. I could feel it growing, and I wanted it out of there. And so I think that there's no one right answer. I think that it's different for everybody. And I think that cancer is one of those areas where Western medicine knows a lot. And so I would certainly pursue that route. And then I would find out about the other things, because they're not mutually exclusive. And I think they're doing a lot of research now around diet and things like that that are really kind of promising. But so I would do some combo.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes. Uh-huh.
I just want to say, Terri, you inspire me, and I'm grateful for you.
Yes.
Oh. Thank you so much. That's really sweet. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, you wake up and you do your gratitude.
Uh-huh.
7 things. What other things that you do to add into your wellness?
Oh, wow. Okay. She said that I had mentioned a gratitude list, and what else do I do to add to my wellness? I want to meditate. Does that count? I really want to meditate. I want to meditate every day, even if only for 10 minutes. I have a meditation group, but that only meets like once a month, so I do that. That really helps when I do it. And I'll let you know when I hit that regular practice in place. I'm now doing Aqua Aerobics. At the College of Marin, I go out in the pool and jump around with a lot of other old people. When I first got to that class, I looked at the pool and I thought, oh my God, I can't be remotely old enough to do this. This is like a cross between Fantasia and Cocoon. But now I love it.
Water aerobics with the
Water aerobics, yeah. I love that. I work on myself sort of relentlessly. I think the steps are great. I actually went on a diet for the first time last summer. I'd always sort of avoided the nutritional stuff. It was like, hey, I can barely eat. I'm going to eat whatever the hell I want. And ice cream goes down real easy. A lot easier than salads. But one of my sons was doing this diet, and so I had to talk to him every day if I did it, so it was worth it. And then I felt so much better. It's crazy. So there are, reading inspiring books. The list just goes on and on. I hope that helps. Well, this is not the view of the sponsor. And I don't even know if it's good, but it's the paleo diet. That may freak people out, but yeah.
My name is Anne. I am an acute myelocytic leukemia survivor. In 1999, I was diagnosed, and I was under that burden for 10 years. But I finally had a transplant at Fred Hutch.
Oh, nice.
But I'm 82 now, or I will be in October, and I think you're a beautiful and gracious woman.
Yes.
I'm in love with you. Thank you.
Oh, well. Thank you, Anne. My mother's name was Anne. So thank you very much and congratulations. That's super great. Yeah.
Terri, thank you very much for sharing your story, and I also want to echo your appreciation of the caregivers. I think you were very lucky to be in Ann Arbor, in Columbus, Ohio, and now just speaking for myself, I'm a pancreatic survivor. About 3.5 years. I wasn't supposed to be here.
Wow.
I'm a high school teacher.
Oh.
And my reward is seeing those kids every day.
Wow.
But, I just want to give my thanks to the terrific people here at Seattle Cancer Care, because a lot of us would not be here.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a granddaughter who's in high school. I wish she had you for a teacher. Yes.
Having gone through the same experiences with my husband as far as doctors saying, oh, it's this or it's that, and finally it being too late in the diagnosis, do you have any tricks? Do you have an arsenal of something to respond to the doctors with when they keep giving you excuses, go off this medication, or oh, it's because of old age, or whatever? Because I know even with myself, I've had knee problems, and they keep saying, try this, try that. It's hard to say no to the doctor.
It is.
Wait another month. In our case, it was way too late.
Oh, I'm sorry. And yes, it's really challenging. And, I'm not bad-mouthing anybody here, and I know doctors are super busy and super, they have a lot to focus on. And I believe that we can advocate for ourselves, and that we have to, and that it's okay to get more than one opinion. And it's okay to take notes. It's okay. I always traveled in a mob. I always took a huge cadre of people with me, because I was too anxious to remember anything. And so I took people who were clearer-minded than I was. And my sister is a pit bull, so you didn't want to mess with her. And, but it works. You are the expert. And, you know, I mean, I wish I would have gotten a second opinion rather than wait 3 months to have the recurrence diagnosed? You bet I do. But, you know, it's one of those things I didn't. And I'm here anyway, so that's where the acceptance comes in. Thanks. Okay, I think we're out of time. Keep writing your stories. Remember, it's not the duration, it's how well lived they are. And notice something every day to be grateful for. And be in this minute. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
All right.